Well, hello, everybody. I've invited my friend and yoga teacher, Tim Hurley, here to have a chat about sensory differences with an eye to how that relates to mindfulness meditation. Um, I mainly practice Buddhist meditation myself. Yoga, well, Tim is a trained yoga teacher and also brings that expertise to this discussion. You may know that there's a lot of overlap, and but also some unique perspectives to both disciplines. So to start out, I'd like to start with a brief visualization exercise to give us something to kind of discuss. I'm not going to spend a whole lot of time settling in for this part. But if we could just get comfortable and close our eyes for a few minutes. And we're going to imagine that it's a nice sunny day and we're in an apple orchard. And it's that time of year when the apples are getting ripe. Maybe got some light jackets on because it's getting a little cooler in the weather. But it's sunny. Maybe a little bit of a breeze and other sounds of the outdoors around us, like birds, maybe a dog in the distance barking. I'd like to imagine walking up to a tree and finding a nice apple that looks ripe, and imagine picking it and holding it in your hand and turning it over. Maybe there's a part of the apple that was facing the sun and it feels a little warmer than the side that was in the shade. You might notice if the apple is smooth and shiny, or maybe it has a more of a dusty appearance or some golden flecks on it. And for this visualization, let's imagine that these apples are clean, and then we don't have to worry about pesticides. And imagine taking a bite out of the apple and the sound that that makes. And then noticing the texture of the apple. Noticing the taste of the apple. Is it sour? Is it sweet? How's the balance of sour and sweet? Are there other pleasant apple notes that you can detect? You might notice that the apple has a certain fragrance to it. Now I'd like to imagine that a friend who you haven't seen for a while has come to join us in the orchard and also enjoy an apple. We say, hello, how are you doing? And They return our greeting. Might imagine what kind of clothes they're wearing. Notice the expression on their face. And then we bid each other goodbye and head off our separate ways. And then just imagine returning to feeling throughout your body as you're sitting right now, imagining the surroundings where you're sitting. And then we can go ahead and open our eyes and have a little chat about that visualization meditation. So one of the kinds of things that I wanted to talk about is I'm autistic, so I have some differences in some of my senses and perception. And to some extent, our external senses like sight and sound and smell and language is also reflected internally into our mind, that we can create that or not to some extent. I'm good with visualization for the most part, but one difference that I do have is that for some reason I can't picture other people's faces. So for certain types of meditation, like loving kindness, the natural thing for me normally would be to try to picture the people that I'm thinking of, but that's not something that I'm personally able to do very well. I can get maybe a second flash of what some of these faces look like, but I can't sustain that for very long.
That was my experience too. I really didn't conjure up a particular face.
Mm-hmm.
Just a felt sense of friendship, sort of safety. This was a safe being to be around and sharing the same experience. So maybe we have that in common.
Hmm.
Yeah,
And I could see like the apple very clearly
me too.
and kind of
And taste it,
sure.
sweetness, the juiciness. Yeah, that was really well conjured. Mhm. Yeah. Um, and let's see. So there wasn't any particular emotion that you invited to explore, but just that sense of this was a friend, a mutual friend, and it was kind of brief. They came and they went,
Right. Yeah.
which is fine. Um, so I really followed along. Um, I didn't find it particularly difficult, and because I have a little bit of experience with this, I watched my mind try to wander into other narratives based on what you were saying. You go, well, wait a minute, no, let's not go there.
Well, yeah. And also that kind of setting, I think, is very evocative of
It is.
memories we have from
Yeah.
going to a local orchard like Loggers where we live. And
Hmm. Yeah, I as a young man, I mowed an orchard for a few years on a tractor with a drag behind mower, and it was a different way of experiencing the orchard, but it was always pleasant.
Mhm. But another interesting thing to possibly notice that certain senses are more vivid than other senses when you're trying to imagine something.
Yeah. I was surprised at how strong the taste was,
Mhm.
and the smell. I could imagine biting into it. That moment of biting and that sound, the taste, the juiciness, the splash against the chin, all of that was really vivid.
Yeah, I think I was a little distracted by the fact that I was also talking. So it was,
It's okay.
but just something to notice.
Yeah. And I imagine that's different for everyone.
Yes.
Mhm.
Uh, I think there can be a tendency to kind of take it for granted that other people have the same
Mm,
imagination or experience that we do.
mm. Yeah, some people might not like apples.
Well, sure, or might have unpleasant memories of an orchard, or
Mm,
uh, yeah, I mean, it's hard to predict.
yeah.
Which is, I guess, where I would encourage if someone is uh, like in a meditation class or something like that to share that feedback with your teacher to,
Yes.
yeah, get some advice on how you could adapt what they're doing.
Yeah.
Um,
That's important because I recall as a teacher, maybe twice, and I can't remember the specific situation. Um, oh, in Yoga Nidra, I was conjuring up a scene that I found really pleasant and enjoyable. And someone after class said that they had had a traumatic experience in a similar setting. So when they were present, I never used that again.
yeah, yeah, just to explain quickly for others watching the video, Yoga Nidra is
Hmm,
also called yogic sleep. It's not exactly sleeping, but more like a visualization meditation with awareness in the body as a important part of the experience.
mhm, mhm.
And something I'm making an effort to do now for certainly for classes is to have an option for a felt sense meditation and have for people who can't visualize very well, if I'm doing something visual, um, and vice versa. If somebody isn't as in tune with their kind of body sensations, might find it easier to use visualizations.
Mhm.
So really, there's a kind of a spectrum from people being able to visualize things very vividly to not being able to visualize at all.
Mm, mhm. Yes. And that's common in many realms. Yeah.
Like a couple suggestions that I got from uh, someone who was unable to visualize, as if you're getting the instruction to visualize or picture, to replace that with word with to imagine, that you can still
Mm,
be able to imagine in a more abstract way what an apple looks like, for example, even though you might not get a very detailed mental image.
mm. That's a good point. Yeah. Um, so, what was your intention, can I ask, in offering that practice?
For people to take a minute to notice their uh, internal and external perception,
Mm,
like how detailed their imagination is in certain areas, and what they might need to kind of adjust for when they're meditating, and also to educate people that there are differences in these areas. I'm hoping to reach other neurodivergent people who are autistic or have ADHD. That people who stick with it, like me, generally, we kind of find our own adaptations along the way. But I really want to make a effort so those few people maybe get frustrated and decide the meditation isn't for them, might give it another chance. Like my father has struggled with that a little bit because he has what's called aphantasia, which is the condition where you don't form mental images. So he had this impression of meditation being this thing where you're visualizing things. But working with him a little bit, I found that body scan meditation and awareness of the physical body was something that he was able to work with.
Great.
And also walking meditation was another option.
Yeah. Just the truth of the human experience is so much that while we're connected by something wonderful, the way we express individually is very divergent, and the capacities that we think we hold in common through the senses are also divergent. Also, there's a spectrum of each, and so all of us land differently in that way. And so it's important not to take for granted that when you invite someone to generate something from within, that their experience is going to be similar to yours. It might be wildly divergent and not at all similar. I happen to be colorblind, and it's an interesting dilemma in a world of people who see color. I do see color, but I don't see what other people seem to see. And so yeah, don't ever let me pick out your wardrobe.
Do you have any tricks so that you don't get well, I guess sock colors are not so bad usually.
Yeah,
as long as you don't have.
Well, I wear gray socks. That's my one size fits all, one color fits all for me. That is an adaptation. I buy clothing that is without a doubt going to work with everything else, because I don't go into wild colors or patterns. I just don't trust myself there. So, and I have had the occasion when it was a long time ago, but I showed up at a dinner party, and my friend took me aside and she said, "I know you don't see this, but your colors really are not working very well." And I don't know why she had to tell me that before the party started, but there it was. So, and I didn't feel bad about it. I was just like, okay, oh, you see that, but I don't, and I'm cool with it. So the invitation is to love ourselves just the way we are and appreciate that.
Yeah, one of my favorite quotes from Mr. Rogers is that people can like you exactly as you are.
Yes, that's beautiful.
Yeah, I actually have that on my wall as a daily reminder when I'm working at my desk.
That's great, especially in this culture. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah,
Good.
and I guess like one bit of encouragement that I'd like to offer people is that if you do stick with meditation and meeting with groups and uh, get a chance to talk to other people, um, like over time, you develop more awareness about your perception, like what areas are uh, stronger and what areas are um, diminished, or not necessarily like a problem, but just that we're all different.
Yeah. Yeah. And I don't want to generalize, but in these practices, um, we're called upon more often than not to locate our experience from an interior locus,
Hmm.
which is where felt sense experience comes from. And I can remember a time long before I began meditating when I didn't feel very, feeling things was, because of my upbringing and background, was, um, it was like a party I wasn't invited to.
Hmm. Hmm.
I had turned off to numb myself to feeling a lot of things because of the difficult childhood that I had. And so it took some practice, and through practice, trust that I could enable and allow that to happen without feeling at risk. And so now um, it's so core to the way I experience meditation practice and yoga practice. Yoga
Hmm.
practice basically is looking inward to your felt sense experience and letting your body inform you about what's possible and what's not, what's enjoyable, and where the boundaries are.
Hmm.
So, yeah, I think maybe that can be a capacity that can be honed with direct experience. And on some level, it also feels like it's just waiting for us to give it the benefit of the doubt.
Well, it kind of reminded me of another thing that I wanted to bring up, which is, well, I have some chronic pain from something called fibromyalgia and um, arthritis. And one of the things that I discovered when I first did a body scan meditation is that I had kind of learned to be numb to discomfort in the body,
Mm, mm.
um, which was very honestly, I was kind of upset about it at the time. Um,
Seems like a natural adaptation.
yeah, yeah. Like basically just to function on a daily basis, I learned to kind of that out as background noise. So like another adaptation that I developed for that, for example, is to shift my focus to like my hands resting together and feeling the contact between my hands to kind of give me a safe place to shift my focus where I didn't have pain.
Mhm.
Um,
Cool.
yeah. And the kind of ease my way into working with discomfort over time.
Yeah, and that speaks to the teachings around mindfulness of pain.
Mhm.
Yeah, so when there's pain, there's often a story accompanying it that the mind is amplifying, and that tends to amplify the experience of pain. So if we can acknowledge the pain and acknowledge the story as separate from the pain, then without the story, the pain is often less um, intense, less distracting,
Mhm.
in my experience. And
Yes,
that's teaching.
absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah, and that can take some, I would say that's a skill
Mm,
that can take some time to
sure.
uh, practice and develop that skill.
I think when I first encountered that, I didn't really believe it. I thought, okay, that sounds great, but I needed to put it into practice directly before I could really buy into it. And
Mhm.
sure enough, with um, an injury I had, where I was facing an injury that was chronically painful until it healed, and it was, my mind was running away with it. Is this going to be forever? How long is it going to, all the things that the mind does, and couldn't sleep, because I couldn't stop thinking about it, couldn't take my attention off of it. And then with practice, with steady, persistent practice, using that direct situation, I eventually began to be able to sort of redirect my attention from the pain and from the story, and use my own breathing to dial myself down, calm myself down, and then fall asleep.
Well, and also if you're out and about and you notice a physical discomfort, there's like you teach in yoga class to, uh, you know, take a nourishing breath
Mhm,
and just pause.
mhm.
And then in that gap to have a moment to see the story, to see what else is going on, you know?
Yes, take the big picture and, yeah, see all the variables, and then determine which ones you can do without, and just put them aside for a little while. We have that capacity.
Or like a thing that I do sometimes with meditation is this idea of kind of zooming in or zooming out that that you can
Mm,
like shift your focus to sounds in your environment or uh picturing the sky uh like an open sky and just kind of holding yourself, imagining yourself in a bigger, more open space.
yeah, the context. Yeah, yeah. I love the zoom lens metaphor.
Mhm.
It's very useful. It's for me. It's very useful for what happens when I follow the breath to its natural conclusion as it exhales, and watch what happens to my attention there. It seems to expand, take in a wider aperture.
Mhm.
Mhm.
And one last thing that I wanted to touch on is something called alexithymia, which is
Can you say that again?
alexithymia.
Alexithymia with a th.
Yeah,
Okay.
Alexithymia.
uh, Alexithymia. Okay. Oh, well, that's interesting. That's a
And she who must not be named thinks that I was talking to my Alexa went off because it was too close to Alexa.
a modern problem.
Yeah. Well, I try to remember to mute it, but sometimes I forget.
That's hilarious.
Um, but what alexithymia is, it has to do with emotions and feelings,
Hmm,
um, which kind of ties to what you were saying about, uh, being kind of numb with some of your
hmm.
emotions. Um, that for me, it's not always intuitive, like kind of the bigger picture, like is this anger, is this sadness? Um, but at least as far as meditation goes, um, it's not super important to pinpoint what the emotion is. I've found for myself that it's sufficient just to be aware of what's happening in the body. And then sometimes, sometimes that will end up kind of clarifying what it is. And sometimes I just sit with the body sensations.
Yeah. Yeah. In meditation practice, from my humble experience, we're accessing a conscious capacity that is beyond distraction.
Mhm.
But if we want to use this term, make our way to that experience, if we want to call it an experience, it's useful to notice, and we might say subtract, what is distracting. So, because the senses are always active, autonomically, 24/7, there's no off button. There's a lot going on, even when you're sitting in stillness and silence. And if your attention is wandering and connecting and amplifying and exemplifying and narrating, which is what the mind does, it can be really discouraging sometimes when that's going on. If you don't sit long enough to sort of let it all simmer down, and then as the mind begins to soften and relax in the space that we give it, the time that we give it, there's an encounter sometimes with profound, effortless awareness that is all-encompassing from the biggest perspective, we might say. And that is delicious.
Yeah, to get to that place, for me, I would say generally takes about a half an hour of sitting. But shorter meditations are still useful. They just kind of have a different purpose, like to gather your wit or to work with a strong emotion that's arisen and come back to whatever you were doing before.
Yeah.
And any meditation is better than no meditation.
Right. And maybe the shortest meditation is one where we take a breath in, follow it with our full attention down to the bottom, and in that moment of comfortable emptiness, that broadening, expanding takes place. We get a taste.
Well, I think this was a good discussion for today. Thank you for joining me and your comments and questions.
Thank you. I like the format. It's really permissive.
All right. Thank you.
You're welcome.